Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Meredith Miller here with your Sana Q&A Mondays. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into this question. This person says, "Hi Meredith, my question relates more towards still feeling empathy for really abusive people and how that can keep you stuck in relationships with them or even simply ruminating about them long after the relationship has ended. How do we let go of people that have physically, sexually, and/or emotionally abused us if we are too busy thinking about how they feel? It almost seems like feeling compassion in these situations is hurtful or harmful to oneself." So that's correct. That's really that point you're talking about when compassion becomes toxic to you. Just like the hope can become toxic. I've talked about how holding on to that hope, like long after the date of expiration of that relationship, that person is proving to you over and over again, they're not changing. They're not going to change. The illusion they're promising you, all of these lies they were telling you, creating this idea of the future that you would have with them is not going to happen. And when you hold on to that hope, it becomes very toxic. And so that's exactly what's happening with the compassion in this situation, because you're giving your compassion to someone who's hurting you. So it's dangerous to have compassion in that way. So the first thing that you need to do is make yourself priority numero uno. So I've mentioned several times Dr. Gabor Mate. He's a Canadian physician, and he talks about how the chronic compulsion to people please others and meet other people's needs before your own greatly increases your risk of developing chronic illnesses such as inflammation-related illnesses, autoimmune-related illnesses, even cancer, right? So let that be a sobering fact, a sobering medical fact, that your compulsion to people please, meaning to keep extending your compassion, in this case, right, to keep extending your compassion to this person who has proved to you over and over again that they don't deserve your compassion because they hurt you. They take advantage of that compassion, right? And then that gets you upset, that gets you sick, that gets you hurt. So when you learn that lesson over and over again, you got to really step back and say, whoa, there's nothing wrong with being compassionate. That's a wonderful, beautiful quality to have. It's wonderful. It's just that you need to put boundaries around your compassion. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But the second step after making yourself priority number one is to be sure that you're labeling that abusive and manipulative person with some kind of label that reaches your subconscious and lets you know who you're really dealing with, who that person really is, so that you can break free from the trauma bonds. Because until you put that label on the person, it's impossible to break free from the Stockholm syndrome. You're going to keep compulsively going back with compassion, with understanding, with empathy, beyond the point that it's okay for you, because it's going to become self-destructive at that point. And it's always easier to blame the other person. Well, he took advantage of my compassion, or she took advantage of my empathy. And that's true in one degree, in one reality, in one dimension. That is true, right? But if you keep doing the same thing, Einstein's definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. If you keep extending your compassion to this person who has proved to you over and over again that they're just going to use and abuse that compassion, then it's your responsibility to take a different action. Okay, if you don't like the results that you're getting in life, you need to look at the actions you're taking. It's very easy to put the blame outside yourself. And again, in one dimension, that is true. And if you want to shift out of the victim state and into the survivor state, that's when you realize that taking 100% responsibility for yourself, for your actions, for your choices is the way forward. Until you take that self-responsibility, it's always going to be like you're feeling helpless, like you're feeling powerless, like you're feeling disempowered, because you're always giving your power away. So when people show you who they are, when they show you over and over again that they're going to take advantage of your compassion, that they're going to use and abuse you, it's up to you then to set new boundaries. So those boundaries can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be mental, and they can be spiritual. So let's look at that for a second, right? So physical boundaries have to do with space, right? Whether or not you allow someone in your physical proximity. Do you allow them to come visit you? Do you go there and visit them? What happens if you run into them in public? How are you going to manage your boundaries in the physical space, right? Another physical boundary is touch. That's your body, right? You have the right to decide who gets to touch your body, how, and when. Okay, I don't care if you're married to someone. It doesn't give them the right to your body. You and only you get to decide that. Anyone else, again, whether you're married or not, anyone else is a guest in your temple. I used to have a Persian friend many years ago. She was much older than me, much wiser. And she would tell me, Meredith, you need to stop letting people run around in your temple with dirty shoes. That was a huge wake-up call for me. I was like, right, I do have the boundaries. Like, I do have the right to set these boundaries and say, no, you haven't earned that right. In fact, you've shown me that you can't be responsible to be near my body. You've shown me that you feel entitled to dictate how you get to use and abuse my body. No way. And, I think you mentioned over here, if you have been sexually abused, right? And so if that's your case, and that's the case of any of you listening to this right now, particularly childhood sexual abuse, where this was programmed in you very early on, not to have physical boundaries, or maybe you find yourself nowadays in situations with people where you don't know how to say no. It's like, intellectually you have the right to say no, but it's like your body, your subconscious, just like in the moment, it doesn't access that. And going back to Gabor Mate again, Dr. Mate, he said, like, when you were a child, if you were sexually abused and you didn't scream and run away, it was because you already knew that you were alone in the world, that no one would listen to you, that no one would hear your cries for help. So if you learned that early on, as an adult, you might still be in that state. You might still be in that place where you want to say no, like every part of you wants to say no, but some kind of conditioning and programming stops you. It mutes you. It paralyzes you. It's like having one of those dreams where you want to scream and nothing comes out, or you want to run and your body is paralyzed and you can't mobilize yourself. It's literally like that, only you're awake and lucid. Right? So you want to undo that programming by really examining, like, where did you learn that? If that's something that you learn, why did you learn that? Well, this happened and that happened. And, so now, okay, this is what happens as an adult, and really recognize that pattern in yourself, and don't blame yourself, forgive yourself for not realizing, for not recognizing, because you were taught to accept that. And now as an adult, taking 100% responsibility for yourself and recognizing you have the right to say no at any time, even if you are married. It doesn't give your partner the right to your body if you don't want to share it. So another physical boundary could be sex, right? In this case, like there's physical touch and then there's sex, right? And so it could even be as simple as, like, you're sitting on the couch with someone and they want to touch you, and in that moment you just don't want touch, and you tell them, I'm sorry, but right now I just don't want to feel your touch. I just need some space, and maybe this is like a respectful person and they get that and they just didn't know, they just wanted to be near you, or maybe they even thought that, like, you wanted them to hold you, to cuddle you, to snuggle you. But if you're not feeling it, it's okay. And it's really good to express that in a very clear way. I'm sorry, I'm just not feeling it. You don't even have to say you're sorry. That's just kind of like my default. I tend to say that. But when it's your body, remember that you have the right to say no at any time. Now, emotional boundaries, right? So, for example, when you're with the narcissist, the psychopath, the sociopath, what happens with the emotional boundaries? That's where the predominant amount of abuse takes place, on the emotional and mental layers. These are less tangible, right? Your body is like a physical, tangible thing. Space, your house, their house, some space around you. It's like physically visible. You can see it. Emotions are much more difficult to see because they're very palpable. You can sense it very strongly. It's just that it's not visible. So for example, the ambient abuse that these manipulative types will do, they will create this environment of fear. Maybe they will tell you things, to terrorize you and make you fearful. Like maybe you talk about this thing that's going on and they just come at you with all this fear, right? You have a choice in that moment. Do you submit to that or not? Do you allow that fear in? Do you take on that fear as your emotion? Or do you have a boundary that says, well, that's you and that's okay. You're afraid. I understand. You have fear about that. I don't. And I don't have to subscribe to your fear, right? You have the right to do that. You don't even have to explain that to them. You don't have to say anything at all. Just recognize that when someone is projecting fear in your direction, you have the choice of whether you subscribe to that or not. The same is with anger. When these people are provoking and provoking and provoking you, you have the choice, right? Do you allow them to make you angry? Do you take it personally? Do you, take to heart the things that they're saying to you or the things that they're doing? Or do you recognize that that person is being an asshole and you want to set that boundary and say, you know what? It's not even worth getting angry at you about that. I'm just not going to even entertain that in my reality. No, thank you. Right? Sometimes the anger gets through. Sometimes what happens is we allow the person to abuse our boundaries and then later we get angry, right? Because anger is a normal and natural response to abuse and use and manipulation. So if you feel angry, probably you need to set a new boundary with someone. And remember that these boundaries, first and foremost, are with yourself. Right? It is your responsibility and your job to set and enforce these boundaries. It's no one else's responsibility. So it's hard to think of that in the moment when this person is like attacking and manipulating and coming at you, but you have to recognize that you have a choice in whether you allow that in, and whether you allow the behavior in, and whether you allow the emotional contamination in, or whether you say, no, thank you. So don't tether your emotions to anyone else's emotional state, or you will be on that emotional roller coaster ride. You remember that, right? You were in these relationships, whether it was with your family, with your friends, with your intimate partner, with a boss or a coworker. And when you didn't have proper emotional boundaries, it was like this, right? The person walked in the room or the door and you're like, okay, you're quickly figuring out what emotional state they're in, and then you're quickly adjusting yourself to meet their needs, and it's like you're immediately in whatever emotional state they're in because you were taught to respond like that since childhood. And then you got into this relationship as an adult, and again, they taught you, they groomed you to do this exact thing. So when they're upset, you don't have the right to be happy. You have to be upset, and they're going to project on you all the feelings that they have, and then you're going to end up owning those if you don't have those boundaries. So recognize that you don't want to tether yourself emotionally to anybody else, or you're just going to be on that ride, and it's going to be the ride of misery. You have the right to determine your own emotional states. The other layer of boundaries is mental. Right? So the emotional and mental layers are the biggest weapons of the narcissist, the psychopath, the sociopath. So the mental boundaries are about, for example, doubt, right? When you start doubting yourself, how much did you have this self-doubt over and over again? You're just doubting and doubting. It was like withering away at your self-esteem and at your self-worth, right? The more that you went on in this relationship, it's like you really started to believe it was from the gaslighting, right? That you started to doubt yourself, you started to doubt your abilities, you started to doubt your physical attractiveness, you started to doubt your intelligence, you started to doubt every choice you made, right? That was a choice though. Recognize that. Now at the time, you probably didn't recognize that. It just probably felt normal, to submit to that. But recognize now that you have the right to set mental boundaries and to say, yeah, that sounds like doubt, and I choose not to subscribe. You can only be in a state of doubt or a state of empowerment, but never both at the same time. So let that sink in. And when a person is trying to get you to doubt yourself, now it can come very covertly, right? The overt narcissist will just tell you, all these really rough, horrible things. They're just like diarrhea of the mouth, right? It's like out and it's open and it's cruel and everything else. And then there's the covert side where it's like these little digs and these little underhanded things. And those are the most destructive seeds of doubt because they're not as easily recognizable at first. And if you let those seeds of doubt plant into your mind, they're going to sprout weeds weeds in the garden of your mind. And that's really going to become difficult for you to do anything, to perform at work, to take care of your kids, to utilize your creative skills, to let go and have a little bit of fun, to even the decisions that you make at the grocery store or something simple like that, because they literally get you to doubt every little single thing you're doing, every judgment you have, every thought you have, every decision you make. Oh, why are you going to do that? Oh, but did you do that? And blah, 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 blah. And it's all this kind of stuff. So you want to be very cautious that when someone is projecting these doubts at you, you don't have to take those on. You're allowed to have a mental boundary that keeps that stuff out, recognizes, that's doubt. You don't even have to argue with that person. In fact, it's better if you don't, because the more you argue with them, the more you get caught in that circular conversation, and then the word salad gets involved. And then if you let all these thoughts and sayings that this person is saying into your mind, later those words are just going to be ringing in your mind, and it could cause you to self-doubt. So in the moment, you want to get on that and say, nope. And again, you don't have to say that to that person, and it's probably better you don't. But inside your inner dialogue, you're like, nope, that's not mine. Nope, I choose faith. I choose faith. I choose empowerment, not doubt. Another mental boundary you can have is about your belief systems. So often what happens is when you get involved with the narcissist, the psychopath, the sociopath, they have their belief systems of the world that they try to superimpose on you, that you have to believe in these things. And a lot of times this will happen when you try to set boundaries. They try to convince you that you don't have the right to do that, or that you're wrong, or that you should be ashamed to set that boundary, or you should feel guilty for setting that boundary. Maybe like you tell the person, okay, let's meet at 11. Let's have the meeting here at our house at 11. And you know that until 11 o'clock, that's your time. It's your time to do whatever you want. You can be surfing Facebook if you want. You could be sitting outside staring at the clouds in the sky if you want. You could be taking a shower. You could be getting ready. You could be playing with your dog. You could be doing anything you want. That is your time. But this person, maybe they text you or something and they're like, oh, I'm going to be 45 minutes early. And you're like, wait, what? I'm not going to be ready. And maybe this is like a pattern that this person does. It's like the way that they love to impose on you is to show up early in your space, right? It's not in a public space where you're both going to meet, and it's fine. They can just sit there and wait. Or if it was like an office building and they arrived early for a meeting, the secretary would tell them, go ahead and please sit in the waiting room for the next 45 minutes until so-and-so is ready to see you. But because it's your space, they abuse that space, right? So that's partly a physical boundary, but it's also a belief system when they start telling you, well, but I just wanted to see you. I just missed you, and I really wanted to have a chance to talk about personal stuff before the meeting. And oh gosh, I really didn't think that it was that big of a deal, and you just made me feel so unwelcome, right? See how they're essentially getting you to doubt your belief systems, your belief system that you have the right to your time and to do whatever you want with your time. Even if they see you on Facebook, it's none of their damn business, because it's your time. You have the right to determine those belief systems. And if someone is imposing like that, you have the right to say, I'm sorry, I would love to talk with you about personal things after the meeting, but we're meeting at 11. 11 o'clock is the start time, not 45 minutes earlier. Another thing that a person might do is manipulate your perception of reality, right? Your perspective. That's another mental boundary that you want to have, is be very clear about what your own perceptions of reality are. And it's good to listen to other people, because you're going to get feedback, you're going to get other ideas that you don't have. But it's also very important that you have boundaries, that you recognize, no, this doesn't match my perception of reality. Actually, this is gaslighting, right? Because gaslighting is that very covert, aggressive way of manipulating another person's perspective of reality. And narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, and borderlines are very, very skilled at doing that too. So you want to have very healthy boundaries around that, where you recognize somewhere inside your body, you get that intuitive message like, no, this isn't truth for me. This isn't my truth. Maybe that's that person's truth, but it's not yours, and you don't have to make it your truth. You have the right to have your perspective of reality. You have the right to disagree with that person. Again, I don't recommend arguing with them, right? Because that doesn't go anywhere good. You can just say simply, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to mine, and we're going to have to agree to disagree. and that's it. Don't argue it. Don't insist on being right, because you're only going to get yourself caught in that self-defense loop. So just set that boundary really clear with yourself. Nope, that's not my perspective of reality. That's okay that you perceive reality as you do, even if you know they're wrong, like they're literally lying about something that just happened 10 minutes ago. That's fine. That's your perspective of reality. And I know what happened. I know what my truth is, and I don't need to subscribe to yours. So another boundary that you want to have is mindset, positive and negative mindset. The narcissist is always going to try to get you to doubt your own mindset. You want to be very clear in how you show up. So when the narcissist comes with the negative mindset, you get to choose. Do you make that your own? Or do you have your own mindset? Can you hear that person come at you with this negativity about everything, whether it's doubt or fear, or whatever that is, even the way that they see the world? Are you going to make that your own, or are you going to have boundaries that say, no, I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to think like that. I'm going to choose a positive mindset. That's your choice. Spiritual boundaries are things like compassion, love, understanding, authenticity. You have the right to determine who you share your compassion with, how much of your compassion you share with people. The same with your love, right? When you realize that someone is abusing your love, you need to set up boundaries so that you stop giving that person your love. It doesn't mean you're not a loving person. It means you recognize that that person is not responsible with the love that you're offering them. And in fact, it's not responsible for you to keep offering it to them unless you want to keep getting hurt. So recognize that you have the right to put boundaries around your compassion and your love, as well as your understanding. Being understanding of someone can be kind of related to the compassion, right? When you understand where they're coming from, when you understand how they might feel that way, right? But you don't have to submit to that. If your truth tells you that that's not working for you, this person is blaming you for something that you didn't do wrong, that you don't owe them, you have the right to say, I'm just not going to extend that compassion and understanding. Like, I see where you're coming from, but I don't have to submit to that. I don't have to make that my own. And your authenticity, being yourself, showing up as your true self, being present as your true self. That's really important, because with the narcissist, the psychopath, the sociopath, there's this tendency to lose one's sense of self with them, to allow them to mold and create you into this person, this object, this thing that they want to serve their needs. So if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you learned very early on that you became an extension of that parent. You existed solely to meet the needs, the whims, the desires, the demands and expectations of that parent. And that was unfortunately a very dysfunctional and very toxic thing to learn. So now as an adult, you got to learn that you have the right to set boundaries around your authenticity and say, no, this doesn't work for me. No, this isn't me. This is me. Oh, I'm sorry you don't like that, but this is me. And you set those boundaries so that you don't lose your sense of self in someone else. Very, very important that you maintain that sense of authenticity if you want to be happy. So, you also mentioned here at the very end, how do we let go of people that have abused us? If we are too busy thinking about how they feel. So that means you have to turn your perception inward a bit more. If you're always focusing outside on how the other person feels and you're always putting their needs and their feelings above your own, you got to turn that back around. You got to point that back inward and recognize, how do you feel? And you should always be asking yourself, how do I feel about that? When someone asks you to do something, when someone expects you to do something, when someone is just interacting with you, keep checking in with yourself. How do I feel right now? How do I feel? That question is really helpful to stop the people-pleasing compulsion that we have, which literally is all about, how does the other person feel and how can I make them feel better because that gives me a sense of worth? No, right? First and foremost, you got to take care of yourself. You got to recognize how you feel. And if you don't feel good, you have the right to set new boundaries. So if you haven't checked out yet my 12-week Sana audio series, I highly recommend it. It's like 12 weeks. It's literally 3 months. And it's going to provide the backbone for you for your self-healing journey. Every week has a different topic. Every episode has a different topic. They have exercises. They have meditations. There's PDF downloads for worksheets so that you can do the exercises. And it's kind of like a cliff notes of the important, messages of each of those lessons. And as you work through that, you're going to work through those old patterns. Sorry, my dog was shaking. You're going to work through those old patterns that you had of people pleasing, of putting other people first, of subscribing to other people's belief systems, of allowing the toxicity, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, into your life. So I highly recommend that. It's only $10. The link is below the video. And if anybody has a question for these Monday Sana Q&As, please click on the link below. That'll take you to my website. You'll need to be logged into my website in order to leave a question on that page. So if you don't have a login yet, go to innerintegration.com. Again, the link is below. And then at the very bottom, enter your name and email to get your own personal login so you can leave a question there. I really appreciate all of you who went ahead and followed my directions and put your questions in the place that I asked so that I can easily gather them for you during these Monday Sana Q&As. I'm sending you all a big hug.